On today's episode of the Wanderings and Wool Gathering podcast, we learn Tbags rarely sees the light of day, we have a change of heart during the review, and Tom Morello is in the mix.
Welcome everyone to Wanderings and Wool Gathering, episode 7. I can't believe we're already at number 7. Seems like just a month and 2/3 ago we were at number 6. Anyway, I'm with Tbags.
Hey, how's it going?
And JPP as usual.
Yo.
How's it going, fellas?
Good.
Going great. Going great. How about yourself today, Foggy?
Not too bad. Fighting a cold, so it may come across here, but I will do my best not to cough constantly.
Yeah, not to bore the listeners, but wherever you're at, let us know how the weather is in your area. It seemed like it went to a grinding halt from 90 degrees down to 45 overnight. It's like, I saw a meme that said, basically, it's like the weather saw a state trooper on the highway.
That's great.
I was lucky enough on Friday. It was our senior night football game I had to supervise, so fortunately it was 40 degrees and rained the entire night, so I was outside from 6 to 10
Nice.
in the rain,
man.
so I'm sure that helped my
Yeah,
cold
most
situation.
certainly.
Well, we had the fun time of trying the furnace out for the first time this year, only to find out it didn't work.
Oh. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, the last last couple of days have been blankets and sweatshirts.
Oh, man.
It's all good. Anyway, I don't know if this is a weather podcast or music.
We are wool gathering,
Oh,
Tony.
that's right. I kid.
Sometimes that will happen. All right, well, we will get it underway then with Paul's challenge from last week. Paul, if you want to just remind us what that was all about.
Yeah, so what I requested for you guys to do was kind of go back in time and try to remember waiting on an album to come out and being anxious to listen to it, only to be disappointed once you received it. And I definitely struggled because I had to travel through memory lane and try to figure it out. So I'm kind of eager to hear what you guys have to say on this particular run.
It was a no-brainer for me. I didn't even have to think about it, honestly.
Cool. Do you want to start us off?
Sure. It won't even take that long. Well, back in the 80s, I was a huge U2 fan. I think when they came onto the scene, I think when they came onto the scene, it was with the War, I think was the album, at least that I remember. And then I went back and found Boy in October. And then there was the concert footage from Red Rocks, which was just amazing. And so, I found this love for U2, and then Unforgettable Fire came out, and Joshua Tree, and Rattle and Hum, and to me, that was some of the best stuff that had come out in the 80s, and I went to the Joshua Tree concert, which was absolutely amazing. So, no doubt, U2 was one of my favorite bands at the time, and I remember, getting pretty excited for Auchtung Baby, and that was it. That was such a departure from what I had come to expect and what I loved from U2. And I don't want to go against what I said in the first episode about bands evolving and following that band through their evolution, because I'm always open to that. But it just, for me, was not a direction that I really wanted to go with the group. And then I think from there, all the records afterwards just got even further away from what I loved about U2. I just remember distinctly that one being the one that was such a departure for me that was just the downfall of my love of U2. And I've never gotten back even anywhere close to liking them the way that I did back in the 80s with all that other music. So that was most definitely a no-brainer for me. I remember that distinctly.
I remember that.
Yeah, that actually kind of passed through my potential roster as well, but I didn't have the the experience with the discography to the extent that you did. So, I wanted to kind of go with something that I had, definitely heard some things in the past. And I tried to find a debut album that, had some hype and momentum and disappointed me, but I couldn't think of anything there. But anyway, sorry, Tony, do you have one in your roster?
Oh, yeah, I do, of course. I had 3, but it's not my challenge, so I can't cheat.
You know what? I'm going to let you if you want to pick a couple from there, because I actually have another example outside of my main pick. So
I got the JPP
I can
pass.
rewrite the rules too. I can pull the Tbags if I want to.
Never, ever say that again.
Stick around, folks. The show's just starting.
That's right. No, but actually, and I think what this goes back to too is also that, we waited for music. We literally waited for music, and it might be the one album that we can buy that month or whatever. So,
right.
Different times, I mean, even when I anticipate an album now, it's like I can fill it with 90 other albums. So, going back to that, I had like you, I had to go back and say like, okay, so what back in the 80s, 90s really were we anticipating pre-Napster? So, for me, it was after Pearl Jam had gone through had knocked it out of the park and not had a sophomore slump, in my opinion, and then came out with Vitology after that, and it was still good, and then No Code came, and that for me was probably the same thing like Steve's saying with you too, the departure. It was obviously like a shift in the band's direction, and it's not to say they shouldn't do that, but that's kind of where I started to part ways with them a little bit. As much as I love them and as much as the concert was great, I just stopped looking forward to their albums, and I always give them a listen, and there's probably 2 on each one I like, but that's different than like sitting there absorbing the entire album the whole time for the first 3 albums,
Mm-hmm.
So Pearl Jam for me was my answer that I was going to go with for sure. The other 2 are very quick answers anyway, but one was just kind of like when Bob Mould was doing like Poison Years and things like that at the time, and then he shifted over to Sugar. It wasn't the same band, but I expected it to be something that was like what Bob Mould was doing. And so it was a disappointment in a different way. It was like, oh, well, he's taking a different direction with a different band. And so I was really highly anticipating Sugar when it came out, because there was a good track off that first album. But and then in reverse, instead of anticipating, I found Pink Floyd and then went back and started listening to older and older stuff as I got more into them.
Mm-hmm.
And, Pink Floyd for me is kind of bookended by, that sounds horrible, but they're bookended by disappointment in the way of like when they weren't a certain phase of the band, the pre stuff is kind of unlistenable and the post stuff is mediocre compared to that sweet spot of those really, really good classic albums.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, those are my 3 answers to the challenge, but that was fairly quick.
Yeah, no, and that's, I can totally relate. And what's funny is your answer kind of ties into mine in a second too. When I worked the record stores right out of high school, Vitology was probably one of the more frequent Pearl Jam albums that came back in as a used copy to resell. And while, it was a great record, but I think fans at that point were starting to kind of see that shift start. And it makes me wonder if, they were just kind of starting that momentum and fans just weren't ready for it at that time. But thankfully, Pearl Jam's still touring and going strong. And you guys saw them at Wrigley Field and they packed the house to this day.
Yeah. And it was a great show. I still love them. It's just in a different way.
Tony, I feel the same way about Pearl Jam. There's this weird little thing though where I always get a little bit excited just thinking, hey, maybe we'll return. And it never turns out. And I always think, man, I really like this album, but I never go back and listen, which tells me I clearly didn't. Yeah. So I totally, I feel that with you too. And then I really did like Sugar. It was different for sure, but without looking this up, I'm not sure, but didn't Black Sheets of Rain come out almost just like right before? It was like it was so close for Bob Mould, but they were so very different. Like right there. It seemed like they were within a year or 2 of each other. Yeah.
And I think that's why I was so anticipating it just being a switch and having some similarities. But, Black Sheets of Rain and that kind of stuff there was some angry and dark melancholy tones to that stuff. And then Sugar, rightfully so, was a little bit more poppy.
I think maybe that was his sampling of being a more readily available pop star kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's since come back and done some good stuff. You should check out some of his stuff under Bob Mould again. He's still good. It's just, I'm older and in a different place. But
yeah, and Husker Du was great, so.
For sure.
Makes me want to revisit it now too.
Well, you can.
I know. If only I had an internet connection and some streaming services. So, cool. You guys ready for my long-winded answer?
I can't wait.
Absolutely.
All right. Yep. So, much like I said in the Vitalogy bit, I worked at a couple of local record stores, one of which was Karma, right out of high school. And one of the things that tended to happen, we'd always get new release sheets and we would see what's coming in the forefront, and we'd also get promotional posters. Most of them we would actually hang up in the store. Some of them the manager's like, no, I don't have any interest in hanging this, so hey, score, you got some decorations for your art in your house and that kind of thing. But I remember absolutely loving, Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger and Super Unknown were just great albums. And I kept seeing that, the newer album was getting ready to come out in 96. It was Down on the Upside. And, bought it as soon as I got it. I didn't even listen to the promo copy. I wanted to just grab it and put it in the car and go. And I remember feeling like, yes, this is Soundgarden, but I think, after they hit that climactic point with those last two albums, that you could just start to see the time for them to take a break. That album certainly had, again, typical Soundgarden direction with the overall feel, but it just didn't have the energy, and it just wasn't written with the dynamic and those tunes that just drove home, like Fell on Black Days and 4th of July and things like that for me. So, I left feeling very disappointed after that. And, even after listening to it, again recently, just to kind of, spark the, see if there's any spark left in it for me, I still kind of feel the same. It didn't really stand the test of time for me. While, I still will listen to it from the reminiscing aspect and enjoy it for what it's worth there. I definitely feel like the earlier efforts were more solid songwriting.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I was into them pretty heavily too. And now that you mentioned that kind of completely skipped my radar, but that was quite a difference between those first two, like hugely commercial successes. But even going back to like, Loud Love and things like that, it's just, then there were some good songs on there, but I'm with you. That one actually just has completely left my mind until you said that.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. And the other answer I had, actually, is a little left of center from the challenge, but it got me thinking about this time as well. Here's the question: were both of you members of Columbia House or BMG?
Yes. Multiple times.
Yeah, and while there was cool opportunity to stock up on a ton of albums for a penny, and what you paid for shipping and handling, let alone the other single CDs that you ordered at a time, really paid for those 12 initial buy-in deals that you had. Yep. But I remember going through like Metal Maniacs and Thrasher magazines, or not Thrasher, but that's a skateboard magazine, but there was definitely some thrash metal themed magazines and Metal Maniacs that had different artists in there that I would read about. Ooh, I gotta check that out. Of course, circle it and put it in my little notepad catalog of things to wait and see once it popped into Columbia House or BMG, and I would try to stock up on those. So you'd place your order, you'd wait 2 to 4 weeks for it to show up. Finally gets there, yes, and you go pop it in, and either you were ecstatic with joy because it was a well invested buy, or you left kicking the dirt because you got duped. So
right.
I definitely don't miss those days for the how much of my allowance it took, but that was certainly an adventure in the days of music.
That was hilarious that you mentioned that. That was such a I think we all did that, but it was so cool because you got 12 all at once, and then those ones would come that you wouldn't send back.
Oh yeah. And I remember when my mom got the bill, because of course it had to be in her name, she was like, well, looks like you're doing a lot of chores for this order, stuff like that. But I certainly did, and I still have a ton of CDs to show for it. As silly as it may sound, one of my biggest beefs with BMG was they never had the official barcode on the labeling. It was always their little label where the barcode went. So if you tried to go and sell it used, they wouldn't take it because it didn't have a barcode they could scan.
Pretty smart. Yeah. So do you guys think, I'm not trying to cut you off, Paul, but when we were talking about like Soundgarden and things like that, because the way music is recorded and released and consumed today, do you think that had anything to do with some of these bands? Like, okay, well, we need to get another album out. You know, like the driving force at the time was the label more than anything. And of course they want to strike while the iron's hot. So, hey, you just had a commercial album that did well and we toured you. Now let's get you back in the studio. Do you think there's any like pressure and like forced writing going on at the time?
Oh, I'm sure of it. I mean, I've never done it firsthand, of course, but I've read and heard stories from people through the years, and you know, a lot of these labels will have a deal where they have to do 5 albums or 10 albums on that contract in order to stay active with them, and unless the band breaks up. So if you want to go off to another label, you can't under that band name. Hence, Prince releasing that Emancipation album. He went to the Symbol to kind of break loose from his record deal, and I've seen. Basically, I've seen some articles and stories from musicians talking about the fact that we got done with this tour. They're like, hey, you did great. We need to get 12 singles or 12 out tracks going, and we want to get 3 real powerful singles. And that's where the producer comes in, and that's where he's kind of putting their feet to the fire to really churn out some great material. And the burnout comes in, and the band fizzles out, and then you don't see anything out of them after that too. And plus. Yeah. I'm sure the personal dynamics of being on the road with these people and how your relationships change after being, a young, energetic, and enthusiastic musician, and everybody, kind of gets weathered on the road and handles it their own way, and personalities change. People, kind of break apart, if you will, and all of that plays a role. I've got a friend that's in the industry, and he's made mention that, while he loves his bandmates and things like that, it was just time to kind of move on and try some new things. He definitely felt that being creative and doing something of his own accord was so important to him that he felt like he had to say goodbye for now, and I'm going to go focus on this, so that way I can kind of regain my energy and get that gratification. So it makes sense, if Soundgarden kind of fizzled out after the Super Unknown album, and it was time for them to take a break, but they didn't. We all hit those spots in our life where we have to kind of learn by going through it, right? So right. I know it's all speculation, but I can only imagine that it's a hustle and grind just like any other job.
Well, I would think too that if you're coming up and you've got all this, this backstory, this angst, this horrible life, whatever that you're getting off your chest and writing these, beautiful, meaningful albums. So you start doing that, and the next thing you know, that's not your life anymore. Your life now is travel for 12 months and then go home and write an album. Well, after a couple albums, what's your knowledge? What are you pulling from? Well, I was on the road for 12 months. I think you lose a little bit of that seed that you were writing from before, because that's not your life. That's probably why all the comedians end up with airplane jokes, because that's now what their life is. And then you're forced because you've got a 5-record deal. Well, I've got 2 more albums I have to do. Well, what am I pulling from now? Where's my inspiration? Maybe it's gone. It's hard to tell.
Yeah. Lots of best of albums at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Just enough to kind of the loophole to say you released X amount of albums, and then you can cut ties and move on. I saw a meme talking about the touring life and things. I saw a meme the other day from a touring musician. It said, "Boy, you tour across the country. That's got to be awesome, to all that sightseeing." And it showed a picture of like a Pilot gas station, McDonald sign, Walmart, truck stop, that type of stuff, because that's typically what you get to endure, except for the club and when you're ready to play. So
yeah. I can't imagine that it's glamorous after a certain point at all.
Mm-hmm.
But, you could pay me to find out.
That's right.
I'll tour.
Hey, this is going to be interesting, guys. We just did our albums that were, less than exciting for us. And so when we do our show notes, are we going to be putting in there the 3 albums that we didn't like? Or are we going to...
Here's a real stinker.
Check this one out. We hated it.
I think it's worth it, just for the fact that if somebody wants to listen to it and chime in with their opinion, they may have something that they really loved about it. And if there's anything that they would like to add, please feel free to comment or get in touch with us. We would love to hear, what your thoughts on the matter.
Sure.
All right, we just voted. We're doing it.
Okay.
All right. Anybody want to put a bow on this, or was that the bow?
I think that was the bow. It was an ugly bow, but it's on there.
Well, we're 3 guys. We don't do well with bows. Okay. It's time to review. So we want to start with 21 Pilots or Tom Morello?
Let's go with 21 Pilots.
Cool. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, me too. I'm super stoked.
How do you guys want to start it off? Paul, you want to, since we did the challenge first?
Sure, that's fine. So I gave it a listen, and I've not really dug deep into 21 Pilots. You hear that a lot from me. I kind of stay in my own little cubby hole and listen to what I listen to, right? But, it gave me a pretty good first impression, to be honest with you. The opening track, Jumpsuit, had a killer opening riff. Excuse me. It was definitely gritty and heavy, and I really liked the vibe. And I felt like the album had a lot of variety. It seemed like there was some hip hop and a little bit of funk element in there. There's also just some cool contrasts from a technical and production standpoint, which I will definitely get into. Like My Blood had some really deep reverb, some gritty bass lines, and just good textures, nice contrast that served the songs well. And, the drums were definitely really thick and punchy. There was a lot of impact there. And I felt like there was one song called, I think it was Neon Gravestones. I'm trying to read my handwriting.
It's an amazing song.
That had some cool break beats and real rich piano in there. And I felt like the album just stayed pretty consistent. And then towards the end of the album, those first handful of tracks definitely were the winners. And it just kind of slowed down and wound down to the end. So it was kind of calm and relaxing by the time you were done with it. But overall, it was a very enjoyable listen. I didn't find myself disappointed.
I was...
go ahead.
Well, when I heard that, I wasn't a 21 Pilots fan. So when Paul said, let's do that one, I thought, okay, great. I'm just thinking it's this little, 2 guys who get all the girls after them, and that sort of thing. So I listened to it the first time, and it was all right, And then I was talking to Metalhead Monday, and he kind of felt the same way. And this gave me a little bit of time, to go back in and dig into it a little bit. And I thought, we always talk about lyrics. So yeah, maybe the song sounds okay. What are we doing lyrically and all that? So I started digging in a little bit. And holy crap, is there like a mountain of stuff that went into this album? They started, I think it was last March or something, on the internet, they were posting things. So the first thing, I'm trying to think, I think they added it to the end of a current video, and it took you to a website. And so when you would go to the website, it gave... like a 404 error. It said, you are in violation. They mustn't know you were here. No one should ever find out about this. You can never tell anyone about this. For the sake of the others' survival, you must keep this silent. And it had a violation code at the bottom. Well, if you put all that information together and then you went to this new site that used the violation code, there's a letter from a character named Clancy. Okay, and so he's in this place, this world that they've created, and he's trying to get out. And so there are people out there was, I guess, an entire Reddit thread where people were trying to put these clues together, and there were snippets of video. It's like, me, guys, in my Rush concept album craze. This is the concept of concept albums, all about mental illness. And it's so clever. I'm not even done going through it. I dug in, started doing the research, went back to the songs after kind of getting this idea of this character Clancy who's trying to escape from this place, and these 9 bishops, who he's trying to avoid or to escape from. And then I went back and found some mentions from one of the band members, Tyler, who apparently has struggled with mental illness, about what this city called Dema, D-E-M-A, means. It's I guess according to him, it's a symbol for a mental state where life has no spiritual meaning. It's only about math and science, and fame is the goal, and he's trying to escape this place. And so when you kind of look at those songs through that lens, it changes a lot. And Paul, you mentioned Neon Gravestones. I love, there's some lines at the end of that because some of what he talks about is how we glorify suicide and mental illness. And so the lines are, I'm not disrespecting what was left behind, just pleading that it does not get glorified. Maybe we swap out what it was that we hold so high. Find your grandparents or someone of age, pay some respects for the path that they paved to life. They were dedicated. Now that should be celebrated.
Wow.
I thought that was so cool. The songs Jumpsuit, Nico and the Niners, and Levitate are the 3 videos they have out. And that's kind of like a trilogy that puts this story together. So I'll leave it at that for now. I may pop back in a bit, but I'm just digging into it. But that really made that whole album for me.
Yeah, this is interesting because I didn't know any of that. So I kind of pride myself sometimes on digging around on the internet, but I think I approached it the same way, kind of like, all right, 21 Pilots, let's load it up and let's listen to it. And I read the lyrics, I listened to every song, and but what's funny is I said in my own notes, I said I think there's a concept here because I saw some like callbacks, on certain things, and then there just seemed to be sometimes that there was a story being told that seemed like it was connected to another song. So I had no idea about any of that stuff. I'm not patting myself on the back because I ended up thinking, well, this isn't connected at all. And I actually, Neon Gravestones was one of those ones that I said, I like the slower paced music with the piano intro, but this is not a significant track to me. So that was just, me listening to it for what it was. So I think there's something with that, putting all that art behind it too, and understanding. I read something not too long ago about, there's a real difference between knowing and understanding. You know your car needs a carburetor. You might not understand why, but you know it. And so, I know what these songs are, but I don't know that I fully understood them. So I'm definitely going to go back and check out that thread. And, you mentioned Rush, so I've got to mention Nine Inch Nails. But, they did the Year Zero thing in a similar fashion with a big story and an online thing and that bled into the real world and all this kind of stuff. So I was very thrilled when that came out. So I'd love to see how this one's being done. As far as the album review goes, like Levitate, I really liked it opening up with Jumpsuit. Levitate ended up being one of my favorite tracks. And I really liked Leave the City, how it ended. I loved the piano. I liked the vocal treatment, the emotion. And I felt like that's the first time that correct me if I'm wrong, but they really had a really intentional, more complicated rhyme scheme going on with the lyrics. So from a technical aspect, I really liked that one. But I gave it upon first listen. Well, not upon first listen, without knowing what you guys just told me, I gave it a 3 out of 5. But I'm going to go back, and on the next episode, I'm not going to get into it, but I'm going to see if my rating still stays at 3, because I'm super interested in that.
Yeah.
Very cool.
This was kind of an interesting thought. The Jumpsuit being a reference to Ephesians, and to the jumpsuit being like God's armor from the Bible. So kind of a cool parallel, I thought, especially with him mentioning that this is kind of this godless place they're trying to escape from. I don't know if there's too much reading into that, but I still thought it was pretty cool.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to figure out if Jumpsuit was something like almost like prison attire type jumpsuit, or if it was jumpsuit like from a plane. When I was first kind of like listening to it. So now a third option is there.
And it's yellow.
Yes.
So like the sun and
right.
Apparently the bishops cannot see color.
Oh, see this? Yeah, so I definitely got to give this the right amount of time. So I'll be back to it.
Cool.
So
Foggy, what was your initial rating on this?
It probably was very similar to what Tbags said. I wasn't, just because it wasn't a group that I really followed or liked that much. And I guess without really knowing the lyrics, I didn't feel like there was as much depth as there is. So I was probably in that 3 range as well. Clearly now it's much higher. Just the thought process that goes into doing something like that is it's something I want to do, and I'm just not smart enough to do it. So got to give them kudos for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. And when I went into listening to it, I had no idea. I didn't dig that deep. I just saw it was new and popped it on while I was working. And from the production standpoint and just overall listening to the energy of the album. That's kind of the perspective I took on it. I gave it a 4. I'm going to definitely dig into it too. I think my rating will probably stay the same just because I'm giving it a high rating, but I'm definitely impressed with, that content you found. I think there's a lot of merit behind, telling a deeper story than just writing some songs and putting them out there, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, and I think it clearly comes from the heart. I mean, clearly this is something he struggled with. And I think in Jumpsuit it mentions, I think, cryptically so, dealing with fame now is a new thing for them. So I like that aspect when it's so real like that.
And that takes me to a point where, of course, this information was there. All I had to do was seek it out, but I didn't, right? And I feel like, for me, there's a certain level of complete saturation being online anymore, be it you're looking for music or getting distracted by, something that catches your eye on social media. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I've got a focused list of things I want to look at, and then somebody says something, and what's that? And then you get down a rabbit hole and you completely forgot what you were looking for. But, that said, it's easy to lose out on the opportunity to kind of read the deeper story. So the question becomes, is music more face value and kind of in the pop realm where we don't necessarily see a deeper story, it's just songs that are churned out, or are there still these deep musical concepts happening, but we just miss the boat on them because of all the extra content that gets in the way of being able to dig deeper?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I think there's an infinitely amount of more distractions out there, and we've gotten older, so we've got other responsibilities. But one thing, though, regardless, I think that's cool is whether it's we didn't seek it out and it was there, or if you jump back 20 years or whatever. The cool thing I think about music in general, but art especially, is that the people that are the diehard fans, that are the ones that invest the time and all that stuff, and the artist gives them an opportunity to have something to kind of hold dear, that puts people like us on the outside. We're throwing like threes out at it and talking in general about it, and then there's these diehard fans that have something much more than we have, and I love that happens. I remember being on the other side of that, when you would like something and your parents wouldn't get it, or somebody else would, some classmates wouldn't get it, or whatever. It was yours, and you dug a lot deeper, and you could understand that. Well, you just don't get it, and that was a fine enough answer, because they didn't get it. They weren't digging into it, and they may not connect with it like we did. So. Yeah. For the 21 Pilots fans, I mean, kudos for them for giving them something so special.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I think too, we're so saturated all the time that everything we do is unless it's something you truly love, is pretty superficial.
Yeah.
The only reason I found that is because I went in and looked up some lyrics, so I could get in a little bit further. Back in the day, when you bought an album, that was probably the only album you were getting for a while.
True.
So what'd you do? You sat around and you pulled out your little book and you looked at those lyrics and you read them as you listened, and you got this deep understanding of the music. Nowadays, all we do is go on to Spotify or Apple Music and go through song after song after song. It's great. We love it. But I just don't think we get that depth on a regular basis like we used to.
That's a great point. I mean, all the way back to one of our episodes talking about album covers. I mean, can't imagine coming up right now and saying what my favorite thumbnail is,
Yeah.
It just falls to the wayside. But like you said, you spend a lot more time with it. And maybe that's just what it takes, even in the busiest of worlds, is to still stop what you're doing and spend some time with it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Paul, last word on 21?
Yeah, I'd say give it a chance. I was really impressed. And if there are any diehard 21 Pilots fans that come across this podcast, we would love your feedback on maybe the experience up to this point. I'm sure there's things we're missing out on, as far as not having that deep connection with it, but definitely would love some perspective. I was, again, just really impressed.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try to follow a little bit more online, because one of the things I came across is that this isn't the last place he's going. So it seems that once he escapes Dima, there will be a final location, and I don't think personally has reached it yet, but I can imagine when he does, the clues will come out, and it'll be fun to try to follow that. So I may try to follow him on social media and just keep up a little bit.
Very cool.
Cool.
All right, fellas, that brings us to Tom Morello's new one. So, Tony, you want to kick us off with Tom Morello?
Yeah. I was really excited about this one because he, I don't know. It just, I mean, my first thing was I was able to look through and see who he was kind of bringing on board. And there were some really good names on there, and I was really interested. Now, I will say the first track I heard, I can't remember what it was, but I was like, uh-oh, I don't know if I'm going to like this or not. But as I went...
Was it Battle Sirens?
It might have been. No, because it had lyrics. Battle Sirens, I think, is instrumental.
Okay.
But,
It is, yeah.
and then I ended up seeing a live version, which helped make it even better for me. But all in all, without going through every track, there was definite highlights. Overall, I mean, I'll just go ahead and throw my rating out there. It was like this close to a 4. It was like 3.75 for me. Because I felt like there was times where it was doing what it was supposed to do, which was showing off his guitar. There was times where it fell to the background and there was the right person on the right track. There was times where I felt like it missed. What's funny is the song How Long, my first note was like, how long is this damn intro? Because the song took forever. But it ended up being my favorite song. Like I gave that one a 4.5 on the album. That was a great track. And then I'm trying to find, on Roadrunner, this is where it kind of is weird for me because like I'm not sure who sang on Roadrunner, but it almost had like a female Zach feel to it. And it was like kind of nostalgic and it was really good, but I'm a lyrics guy and it was so like a high school poem for me being sung. So that was my lowest rating was a 2.5 on that one. But all in all, I mean, I think, like I said, without going through every track, there were times where the guitar was great, the lyrics were decent, the lyrics were great, the music was decent, and there was times where it really hit, but it all averaged out to be almost a 4 for me. What about you, Foggy?
Well, okay. For me, I wanted more of the guitar, and I know that's selfish because he too is evolving. But that's what I love about him. That's what his signature is. You know, I don't go to the Colts game to watch Andrew Luck play linebacker. I want him throwing the football.
Yeah.
So same thing here. I want him killing it on guitar, and there were a few cases of that where it was good. For me, the highlights were Battle Sirens. I thought was a nice way to kick off the album. Good instrumental. I really dug Vigilante Nocturno. Thought that was pretty good. And I really liked Lucky One featuring K Flay. Tbags, what's the first name on that one?
K Flay?
Yep.
Yes. What about it?
Exactly. I didn't know what her first name was. I didn't look it up.
Okay. Sorry, yeah. I've only known her as K Flay.
We'll come back to that later, but she's got kind of a mesmerizing voice. I thought that was really nice on that song.
Yeah.
So those three were probably my favorites. And it was just kind of a weird thing, and maybe I made too much out of it. You guys tell me if I'm being a dick or whatever. But so we all know, Morello is really smart. You know, went to Harvard, poli-sci. So when he talks about social injustice, it's probably coming from a place of good knowledge, I would assume. It wasn't Zach De La Rocha doing it all in Rage. He was there with the thought behind it too, and the writing. It was just weird in, what was the name of the song? We Don't Need You. And it was a pretty heady song. They talked about the board versus Brown, or Brown versus Board of Education. And it was a pretty good, I felt like most of the way through, it was making some good points about societal ills. And then it breaks out, your daughter on my dick. And I thought, we're making this, really strong point, and then we throw in a line like that demeaning women, almost like taking us back to the days when, as Chuck D said, it went from that kind of music was the CNN of the hip-hop world to Cartoon Network, when it all became about drugs and women and cars and all that. Yeah. I don't think it went quite that far, but it just sort of, to me, just seemed out of place in that song and sort of demeaning, especially in a time like now when, the women's movement's so strong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm taking it too far, but you guys will let me know. So, and my rating, by the way, not as high as Tony's. It was more of a pie rating. That's 3.14.
Something.
Bunch more numbers.
Yeah.
I see what you did there. Now I'm hungry.
Strawberry
Now
rhubarb.
you're talking. That
Yeah.
sounds good. Yeah.
Paul?
I had a hard time with this one. I'm not gonna lie. Tom Morello is one of my guitar heroes. You know, the riffs he creates are solid grooves. For those who play guitar, the octave pedal is one of my go-to weapons because of him. It adds a little extra grit and dirt to the riff, especially if you don't have a bass player and you want to jam with the drummer. He just thickens your sound, and it's just fun to create a big wall by yourself. But I was hoping for more of him through the songs. I just felt like, he kind of kicked off a lot of songs with an opening riff, and then the guests would kind of take over, and the electronic production would come into play. As much as I love electronic music, here comes that word fuddy-duddy again, but, I am a bit of a curmudgeon when it comes to, some styles of electronic music. I don't like the air horn, and some of that style of production. I feel like I hear a lot of the similar elements, and there's a lot of repetition between artists using those elements in order to foster that attention and be in the forefront. But yeah, I mean, there's some good songs on there, don't get me wrong. I definitely liked Rabbit's Revenge. I thought that was kind of cool. I do like Bass Nectar. I think he does some interesting stuff. How Long, much like you said, Tony, it was definitely quite an intro, but it turned out to be, one of the stronger cuts for me as well. Pretty Lights, I was really impressed to see that he was on there. I remember hearing his name through some friends that found him on the internet, just kind of doing his own grassroots uprising with playing his sets and playing Red Rocks and things like that. So, that's cool that, he's made it to Tom Morello's attention and being involved with the collaboration. Lead Poisoning was a track that I really liked too, but I'm also, a big fan of Jizza and RZA as well. So, yeah, overall, I had high expectations, much like my challenge, and it fell short for me. But I will listen to it a couple more times and see if anything changes for me. But I'm going to go below the pie and get to the crust and just give it a 3.
Okay. That's fair. What do you guys think about Find Another Way? That was one I meant to ask you guys about. I think that's the one with Mumford on it. Somebody...
Oh, Marcus Mumford?
Yes.
I'll have to go back and listen to it because I don't remember it leaving an impression, honestly.
Well, to me, I'm just looking at my notes, and I was saying, wow, I didn't think this combination would work, but it works well in my opinion. Love the vocals, and the guitar solos reminds me of Audio Slave. So it's kind of sat in a really good pocket for me on that one.
Cool. I'll give it another listen, and that maybe it's just me being grumpy and yelling, "Get off my lawn," but sometimes that happens when you have high expectations and you're just like, oh, this isn't working out at all.
Yeah, I know. I get it. I do.
Paul, your connection cut out, but the start of my review was very similar to yours. Yeah, and I've listened to it probably 7 or 8 times.
Yeah,
straight through. So I just don't feel like it's going to grow on me any more than it has.
I got you. Yeah, I've given it a couple listens. I just feel like I need to give it a few more to really, gather a better formulated opinion. But my overall impression right now is, like I said, was really hoping to hear a little more epic Tom Morello, but it didn't do that. And so,
yeah,
and feel free to berate me for my high expectations of an artist to do what they want to do when we've already argued, hey, artists can do what they want, but
we don't have to like it.
I'm guilty. Yep.
I think something we should add to our ratings, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit. We're giving them numbers, but we should do something with the likelihood that we would return and listen to that album.
That's a good point.
After having had to listen to it for a review. Yeah,
and for me, because I am a playlist guy, sometimes it'll be like, okay, that I'll drag it immediately into a playlist in Spotify for something that I know I'm going to work to, and I'll listen to it for the next 2 months straight, So it might even be the whole album, but so I think there may be 2 ratings there as far as like returning to it versus like, how many pull out things can we get from it too?
True.
Because it's hard to listen to a whole album for me right now.
I try to do it when I'm like working outside or doing a project or something. Or sometimes I'll put it on at school while I'm working.
Yeah, if I went outside, I would do that too.
You've seen it once, though, right?
I did on my screen. It looked cool.
It's definitely cool right now.
Yeah.
Hey, originally before I looked up the lyrics and dug into what 21 Pilots was about, my review was going to be, this is probably the best album we're going to review all year, but I will never listen to it again because I didn't really like it that much. When did that change?
Yeah. That's cool, though, that it changes. I like that. And like Paul said, I would love to have, hopefully we can put some hashtags and get some 21 Pilot fans to weigh in, because I love being schooled on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, much like when we were in high school and we were trading cassettes to borrow and things like that, somebody would turn you on to new music. They would certainly give you their elevator pitch on why this band is so fantastic, and you would do the same, right? So, you know, we'd love to see that kind of dialogue in our community as well.
Absolutely.
For sure. All right, fellas. You ready for the new challenge?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Is it my challenge this week?
Yes.
It is. I hope you have it, because it's time.
I have two. I'm going to let you guys vote.
Man.
Great.
Because I was sure I was going with one, and then I thought, no, that's just playing to myself. So I'm just going to open it up. Okay, so here are your choices. You ready?
Yes.
Favorite soundtrack or favorite concept album?
Ooh.
I'm going to go with soundtrack.
Damn it, I was going with concept. We come from two different places.
Yeah, but you know what? I like a good challenge.
Originally, I was going to do concept, and then I thought I maybe switch it up just because I've talked about it so much recently. Let's just do soundtrack.
Okay.
Good with that?
Not really, but yeah.
Tony, you rewrote the rules last time.
I know.
Tony's so mad he's going to go outside.
Yeah, I almost did. No, that's good. That's good. Soundtracks are great. It's like anything else with this stuff. I think these challenges are hard just because we've got a lot of years under our belt as far as listening to music, and there's just more and more and more coming out there, and we keep listening, and we all like movies. So gosh, it's gonna be tough, but
yeah,
we can do it.
Yes, we can.
Paul.
Yes, sir.
JPP. Listen to anything new this week?
I did. This one squeaked past me, and I was really surprised. But there's an artist I found on the internet a little while back. I'll give you a little backstory. There was a video that was circulating on Facebook of a band called Knower, Knower.
Okay.
And it was a group of musicians. They're in a house, just kind of planted in a hallway and where they could fit. Looks like they were upstairs and just kind of squeezed in between the bedrooms and whatnot. And somebody filmed them performing this song live, and it was fantastic. Great bass player, keyboard player, had some cool chops. Singer, she was incredible. And there was a saxophone player, and then this drummer. And they popped the drummer's name up in the middle of the song. His name was Lewis Cole. And I did some research on him back then and found out that it was him and the singer. Her name escapes me right now. I'll have to look it up, but I think it's Genevieve. But fantastic. They wrote a whole slew of songs, and many of them are not kid friendly. I'll leave it at that, but they're catchy. They're fun. He's a great keyboard player, and he's a fantastic drummer too, and just solid grooves, kind of some jazz funk soul things going on with it too. But their hooks are great, and many of the tunes are hilarious. Well, in August, he released a solo album called Time, and I'd seen some videos and hadn't seen this album come out yet, but some standout tracks are Weird Part of the Night. Great song. It's got a great little groove, and he's talking about when you're up late, and that's when you're most creative, and just how your brain goes crazy when you're up late and being productive and that kind of stuff. And then there's another song on there called Tunnels in the Air, which Thundercat is on. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard him at all, but fantastic bass player. On one of his albums, he's actually got Michael McDonald and Kenny Loggins singing along with him. It's tasty and certainly a guilty pleasure. So I ended up in that rabbit hole listening to those artists, and I'll put them in the show notes. I highly recommend it. It's a good time. And then it also kind of put me in a nostalgic mood too, just kind of hearing some of the lush string arrangements and stuff like that. So I ended up popping in Moby's Play album as well.
Okay. Yeah, I always like listening to kind of the stuff that even we put in there. So I can't wait to hear what you're playing there.
Yeah, definitely. And if you get a chance to look up the video for Weird Part of the Night, it's hilarious. It's, him and a couple of girls are kind of dancing in the middle of the night, and he's got a little microphone, and it looks like he's a showman, and they just keep cutting him into different scenes. He's in a grocery store, he's in the parking lot doing a crazy dance, and it's hysterical, I definitely was pulled in and wanted to hear more.
Awesome. Froggy, what are you listening to?
Well, since you asked, I found this little-known band. I think they're called the Beatles.
Interesting.
I lie. I don't like the Beatles.
I don't either.
That'll be our first piece of hate mail. I don't like the Beatles, and everybody always yells and screams at me because apparently you have to. I recognize their greatness and their place, but I just don't like the music. So this week I absolutely listened to nothing else. It was just 21 Pilots and Tom Morello over and over. So I don't have anything to add. That's so lame. But that's the way it is.
Okay, that's all right. Maybe you can add something later on social media just as you get to listening to other things this week. For me, I kind of was back and forth between some different... I listen for depending on my mood. So I went into... I started off with like just different kind of like melancholy stuff. That's kind of the theme. But Ani Difranco has a song called Gray, and she's very poetic and...
yeah.
So there's a line in that song that says, as bad as I am, I'm proud of the fact that I'm worse than I seem. And I've always kind of loved that line. So Ani Difranco, Gray. But then it kind of moved me into, anytime I listen to some sad music, I almost have to listen to some mad music to kind of get myself out of that funk. And then eventually, hopefully, see some sunshine somewhere. But so Sacrifice by Bob Mould, since we were talking about all these different albums, I went back and listened to some stuff, but Sacrifice, Let There Be Peace, that's a great song, and yes. I'm picking out some lines from that one, but I like when he says, if you're planning a future of indefinite grace, you better start removing the lines of deceit from your face.
Wow.
That's a great one. And then ending that with a nice happy one, The Great Destroyer by Nine Inch Nails. And I love that one. Lyrics, I love the lyrics as well, but I love that it just goes into essentially a noise solo. And so it kind of reflects the chaos that sometimes, when you're kind of hyped up and mad, that's what it sounds like in my head. So it's good to hear it through the speakers. That's what I got.
Right on.
I think I have a plan for next week. What I'm going to do is just write down what you guys say, and then next week I'm going to be like, there's this group called Knower. You guys are going to love them. And Bob Mould's got this great song called Sacrifice. What? That's what I listen to.
I looked up Kay Flay, Stevie.
Yes.
Her name's Catherine Meredith Flaherty.
Catherine Flaherty.
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, she's got a great voice, and I will have to go back and find that email you sent me eons ago.
Yeah.
Apparently I missed.
I'll have to post that video because that was her building a song, and I loved that. But then there's another video recently of songs off of one of her own albums, and it's got a very kind of dark vibe to it. The video itself was pretty cool, so we'll make sure we put that in the links as well.
Fantastic.
Very cool. And while you were chatting, I did a quick search on Knower. Yeah, Lewis Cole, and yeah, it's Genevieve Artadi. That's the vocalist's name. She's got a fantastic voice.
Okay. I love female vocalists.
Where did you find? Were you on YouTube or Apple? What were you on?
Oh, as far as to listen to them, they are all over. They're on Apple Music. They're on YouTube, Spotify, and Bandcamp for that matter.
Speaking of being all over, where are we at, Paul? Since you're putting us up all over the place.
Well, if you want to find us on CastBox for Android devices, you can find us there under Wanderings and Wool Gathering. We are on SoundCloud for those who like to stream there, iTunes, YouTube, and on Facebook now.
Sweet. I'll have to go check us out.
Yeah, kind of feels like that Rob Schneider SNL sketch. Getting socializing.
Yeah.
Tbags, where can we find you?
I'm still just on the email thing right now. So Tbags, TBAGS at wanderingandwoolgathering.com.
Yeah, a while back he mentioned carrier pigeons, but he's eaten them all, and I just don't have the budget to continue that. So,
well, that's sad because I've grown to have a taste for those.
And apparently one place you will not find Tbags is outdoors. So do not look for him. He is a hermit.
True.
And you can find me at breakthefourth.com, writing and editing. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I am Foggy's pal. And hopefully I'll be tweeting some of these examples of these songs and albums that we've talked about this week. So if you guys follow me there, you can pick up those performances on Twitter. So that's where I am certainly most active.
Sweet.
Sounds good. And I forgot to shout out, sorry. If you look for Just Plain Paul, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook under JPP Invasion.
Yes. Highly recommend Paul every week. So check him out.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I think that wraps up this week. Come back next week, and we will be talking about soundtracks, and we will select another album to review. Who knows what it will be. Hopefully midweek I will post on Twitter and at Wanderings and Wool Gathering on Facebook what that album will be. So hope you guys had a good time tonight. We'll see you next week.
Hey peeps, the Wanderings and Wool Gathering podcast is now on iTunes. Give us a review and rating there. We would love your feedback on the show. Also, if you're on Facebook, you can find us at Wanderings and Wool Gathering. Please like, comment, and share the content with your friends. And on YouTube, you can hit that subscribe button, like, and comment as well. We would love your feedback in regards to the topics we cover in the show, including your own suggestions for review. There's lots of music out there, and we would love to talk about it. Thanks again for listening, and we will catch you next week.